Each of our speakers for sharing some of your journeys. I very much appreciate your thoughts. I invite you to please rise as we hear our gospel reading for today. It's from the 13th chapter of John's gospel. It kind of gives us the why behind these trips and really any of the ministries that we do. It's on page 877 if you'd like to follow along. This is continuing the story of the Last Supper. When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I'm with you only a little longer. You'll look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Friends, this is the gospel of the Lord. I invite you to please be seated. Once again, thank you to each of our speakers for sharing their stories. But also, I want to start with a word of thanks to you. Many of you, as I look around the room, many of you were prayer partners for our Kids on the Road. And I so very much appreciate that. What an incredible gift. I love being able to tell them on the first night, by the way, there is someone back home who has your name, and they've been praying for you before, and they'll be praying for you throughout this entire trip. And it's also fun on the last night when they're writing their notes to their prayer partners, because many times they'll ask for extra paper because they have so much they want to share to say, here's how God answered your prayers this week in my life. Thank you also for your ongoing financial support, all of the Lent dinners, the miniature golf, the gift wrapping, all of those things help support the kids on their trips. And so thank you for your ongoing support for our kids. Well, folks, it is unofficially the second to last weekend of summer. The fair has run its course. The Little League World Series is nearly over. Fall sports practices are going full speed ahead. I know many of you have already started your kitchen canning operations, and so that's why it seems fitting that we would take just a moment to look back on the summer that has been. Many of my highlights are the same as yours: fishing, softball, baseball, picnics, the fair, the sound of a flushing toilet. All of them, I know, we share in common, right? Perhaps. It's true. Among my favorite moments this summer was when the woman whose house we were in for the week, her name is Tina, flushed her lovely raspberry-colored toilet after 5 days of us working in her house, because it signaled that her bathroom was fully functional again, and it signaled that neither Tina nor her sister, nor any of her grandchildren would need to worry about falling through that particular rough patch of floor or having the sewage pipe below it leaking anymore either into the crawl space beneath her house. It also signaled the end of our week serving in Tina's house. It was a week for my work crew filled with many challenges, lots of questions, some great accomplishments, some improvised fixes, a lot of new skills among our entire crew of 7. Yes, there were some tears, but there was even more laughter. But here's the best part. Our experience wasn't unique. During our time in West Virginia, we were one of 6 work crews. And so while I knew these things were happening at Tina's house, I also knew that there were 5 other groups having the exact same experiences. Now, we weren't doing all the same work. As we just heard Hannah share, it wasn't just a ramp. It was like 30 feet of ramp. It was amazing, and they did it in a week. There were other groups that were digging drainage ditches, other groups that were installing drywall and floors. There was a lot of work done, and every single group had a very similar story about their experiences of love and compassion. And I knew that not only that, but I knew that there was a group of kids who had just been to Wisconsin a couple weeks before who had had a very similar experience working at Camp Amnicon. As you heard Dylan say, putting down railroad ties along trails, spreading gravel and wood chips, clearing paths for the camp to be able to do its ministry. And I also knew that there was a group of folks who had just come back from Pine Ridge, who had had powerful experiences, as Rob and Taylor said, of listening, of being with people who they had never known before, but who very quickly became friends and fellow travelers on this journey. And I also knew that in just a couple weeks, there would be a group of kids headed to Detroit who were going to have powerful experiences of ministry, doing things like clearing vacant lots so that they could be used as parks again, of clearing neighborhoods so kids wouldn't have to be afraid of stepping on glass or garbage or any of those sorts of things, of getting to know people as they served in a soup kitchen one night and spending time with the clients who stopped by and getting to hear their stories. I knew our experience was not unique. And the exciting thing is, our experience is also an invitation for each of us. Yes, we get to do these amazing things on the road, but we can do these amazing things here as well. Kids and adults this summer experienced compassion in a way that they had never experienced before. They used muscles that they didn't even know they had to do things that they didn't even know they could do for people they had never yet met. I saw this summer as heat and humidity had no effect on their effort. I saw this summer as dirt became an incidental dietary supplement all week long. I saw Band-Aids become part of our daily ritual as we doled them out, much like uniforms. And I love hearing these stories because I know that these stories, these are just the tip of our summer iceberg. For every story you hear here, there are 30 to 40 others for each person of what God was up to this summer. And so I hope, whenever you see one of these Live on Purpose shirts, I hope whether it's the yellow one, the blue one, the green one, whatever one someone's wearing, I hope you'll ask, hey, did you go on a trip? Which trip did you go on? Tell me about it, because I know there will be stories of powerful ministry attached. But folks, the beauty of our summer ministry is not how amazing our kids are, which they are. The beauty of our summer ministry is that there's absolutely no way that it should ever work. If you think about sort of our country's landscape during the summer, thousands and thousands of junior high and high school kids, some completely unskilled, some of them newly skilled, hit the road to go serve with adult leaders. And they go from all places, to camps, to retreat centers, with service organizations of all kinds, with the sole purpose of serving. Now, all of these unskilled folks go, and they're supervised, they're managed by college kids who usually have very little construction experience themselves. Their number one qualification for organizing these work crews is an incredible passion for serving Christ through serving others. And so all of these amateurs get together and they do these incredible things. And I'll tell you, the work projects we do are very seldom simple fixes, the kind you would see on, say, HGTV or in your favorite do-it-yourself manual. They usually require some creative thought and some skills that, well, none of us have ever considered before. And the great news is, it still works. God still is at work. And so the beauty of our summer ministry, which we can all appreciate, is not just how amazing our young people are, which they are, but it's how surprising and incredible our God is. It's the Spirit's work that brings people together to do these things that need to be done in ways that changes lives. By regular measures, it shouldn't work, but it does. So as Hannah talked about God sightings, that's my big one for the summer, is that these things that shouldn't fall together into place to actually do the things that need to be done always do. And I see the change throughout the week. The work that was so much drudgery at the beginning actually starts to become fun. The impossible size of the task becomes manageable. The near exhaustion at the end of every day becomes energy again. The tedious stuff begins to take on greater and greater meaning as we recognize that the work we do is not just this screw, not just this nail, not just this piece of drywall, but it's actually work towards someone's life. It's truly all God's work being done through and with our hands. And I'll tell you, it doesn't make sense to most of the world. I don't know how many times I've heard people at various places, whether it was Michigan or West Virginia or when I'm in Colorado or New Orleans, wherever I've been, that have said, "You came from Minnesota to do this?" And my answer has always been, actually, I came from Minnesota to meet you. But in order to do that, I needed to work on your toilet. God's funny that way. It's all God's work that we're doing. Now, I've mentioned before, Romans is my favorite book of the Bible. And today I'm again reminded why. Paul's encouragement, do not be conformed to this world, but instead be transformed, is to view the world with a different kind of vision. See, for Paul, the entire world is filled with potential because all of it belongs to God, and we are children of God's grace. Therefore, this entire world is ready to be put to work for God's purposes. Sometimes we'll get that backwards. We fall victim to the belief that we're here just to serve the demands and the desires of the world, to figure out how we just fit into the systems and the structures that already exist. And Paul says, you don't have to do that. Actually, I'd rather you didn't. Because you see, when the work and the purpose is God's, we embrace a new perspective, one that seeks to change the world, to make the world look more like God's kingdom and less like our own, rather than feeding the world's limited, confining expectations. And so each trip this summer had the same devotion on the first night. You heard Dylan talk about it just a minute ago. It was focused on a portion of Isaiah 43. Verse 19 says, I'm about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? And with that scripture, we asked people what new things they hoped to see in themselves during their trip. Some had answers. Others didn't, because they weren't quite sure yet. And that's okay. That doesn't really matter. What matters is the thought behind it. See, we as people of faith are invited by God to approach each day with the expectation that there will be something new and unique. God doesn't take days off like that. God's always at work. And we get to be witnesses to that. And remember that not only are witnesses passive observers, witnesses are people who see and then share. But there's more. As more than mere witnesses, there are times when we become the vehicle for God's plans. This is the foundation for our ELCA motto. We are the hands invited to do God's work. And if it's God's work, it changes the world. So once again, I just remind you that on September 10th, we have one of our God's Work, Our Hands events coming up. I hope to see all of you serving in some capacity. I know some of you are already checking out, thinking, nope, that's not for me, that's for the younger folks. No, it's not. We need you. And some of you are saying, nope, I'm too little for that. No, you're not. We need you. Well, I'm too busy for that. Probably. But I invite you and I encourage you to cut out some time. It's a couple of hours to see God's work being done through, with, and around you. Paul says, be transformed, not conformed. See the world differently than the world sees itself. A way that I've said it over the years has just been, be weird. Swim against the current. Do something different, because that's where God invites us. We serve an amazing God who teaches us to love and who teaches us to use the gifts that we've been given for the sake of others. And in that service, in that daily service, our world changes. One project, one deck, one toilet, one painted garage, one vacant lot, one repurposed tire, one smile, one hug at a time. That's how God works sometimes through each and every one of us. Thanks be to God. Amen.